Happy Sunday. I hope you guys had a pretty awesome weekend. I know I did. I had a great trip, a couple of days camping, but man, it was windy out there. And then on my way back, I got to stop by. I had a friend up in the Portland Tigard area all camping out at Four Corners out by Milliken. So I got to spend a little time yesterday afternoon with them. All right, looks like we've got all of the usual crowd here. So if you're tuning in for the first time to one of my live videos, you might want to skip ahead about 3 or 5 minutes to get into the actual meat of the conversation, because I'm just going to kind of chill and hang out and greet people and see who's on here for a couple of minutes before I get right into everything. Angie Jensen from Texas, Dirt Bandit Outdoors is in the house. Jacqueline, Asa, Carol, Adventure Two Wheels. Happy Sunday, my friend. DM Ardu's back. Jason Perry. Let's see. Good evening, Jacqueline. George, Southwest Idaho Overlanding is on. Sounds like we might. I don't see. Oh, there's Odie Slim on here. Yep. All right. So looks like I think Odie Slim and George from Southwest Idaho Overlanding and I are all going to try to connect up. It sounds like things might be coming together for us all to converge on the same location out in southeastern Oregon somewhere. I see Lummox Overland Adventures and Mark Taniguchi, my man. Nate O'Reilly, Daniel Tolman. God, it's cool to see everybody tonight. So, right out of the man again, I hope you all had an amazing weekend. I know I did. I apologize for not getting another video out this week. I'm so close to being done with another Oregon Overland Destinations video. Hopefully I'll pop it out tomorrow evening. And then I've got the trip I took this weekend. I started editing that video today too. So that was a pretty cool trip. I went up to try to track down a section of the old Willamette Valley Cascade Mountain Military Wagon Road. I was able to find one section of it. The other area where I was hoping to get to was an area where the Cascade Mountain, the Willamette Valley Cascade Mountain Wagon Road and the Wairika Trail kind of converged together for a short distance. And it was actually muddy and snowy up in there, and I wasn't able to get quite back up in there, but I found some really cool stuff. What's up, Craig? Good to see you, my man. Jeeping with John and Jen in the house. Jason Snyder. Always a pleasure, my friend. Stand Up America. Travis Hudson's on here. Oh, man. Travis is saying we lost audio? No, that can't be. Dana Barish, hi from Florida. Stand Up America from Canby. Let's see. Wow, we got people from all over. Yo, my brothers from Lolo Overland are in the house. Is that Daniel or Josh or both? Okay, cool. Dirt Bandit Outdoors says audio is good. All right, so let's start to get into this, man, because I'm kind of excited about this evening. I'm going to tell you guys that I always get a little bit nervous about this, but there's something that I've been wanting to talk to you guys about for a while, and it's going to become kind of a theme for some of my trips coming up here. So we're going to spend a little time tonight talking about lost wagon trains and lost gold and the potential for finding lost treasure out here, but also for show and tell tonight. Well, this will be a little bit of an experiment. I've got a really, really kind of crazy gift package here from Oregon Mike. So we'll crack that thing open. Have not even peeked inside it. It was taped up with about 17 rolls of packing tape. So I did slit the packing tape so I wouldn't have to do that in front of you guys. But we'll might be a little awkward doing that on camera, but I'm kind of excited to see what's in. Oregon Mike's always pretty creative with his care packages that he sends over. So we'll go into that. Real quick before we get started, you guys know the drill now that have been here for a while, but if you have questions during the stream, go ahead and shoot them out there. I try to pay attention to the comments, and if they relate kind of to the story, I'll answer questions along the way. And if not, I'll have a point later on in the live stream where I give you guys an opportunity to ask questions. But the super chats, a great way to get your question or your comment to stand out. Also, that's one of the most awesome ways to support my channel. As you guys know, the super chat revenues on these live streams, the direct contributions to the PayPal donate link in the description of this video down below, and the merchandise sales through Lolo Overland Outfitters, the Coyote Works hoodies, hats, t-shirts, things like that. Those three things are really the saving grace for my channel. Those keep things rolling and keep me in camera and all the equipment that it takes to keep running this. So super chats, direct contributions to the PayPal donate below, and let's have a good time. Let me see real quick here. Jimmy Yu, good to see you, my friend. I think Jackie actually was out on a camping trip. Oh, Augustine, my friend. Augustine was one of the guys I was telling you about that I met up with yesterday evening, who were all out at Four Corners for an annual trip, man. We had a good time hanging out around the campfire. Actually, I was dead beat on my dragging my butt back in from a couple of days out in the windy desert, popped into their camp, and I was thinking I was just going to say hi to my buddy Augustine. Ended up meeting a bunch of cool guys and hanging out around the fire for, I don't know, 3-4 hours or something like that. So Augustine, man, I appreciate the invite. That was really cool. Really enjoyed meeting your buddies, and hopefully we'll all get to see each other again. Sean Squatch, my friend, thank you, sir, for the gas fund, and a good evening to you as well. So let's, my beverage for the evening, as usual, a classic hint, and then I've got a special cocktail in here of an Aranciata San Pellegrino mixed with a little bit of coconut water. So that's the money right there. All right, so I wanted to talk to you guys about a couple of stories that kind of all converge on each other tonight. So the one story is a story about a man, one of two brothers who ended up who were born back in Virginia. Camping Mike and Canine Buddy, how are you guys doing? Oh, and you're out there with Faith, the fitness coach, too. Faith, if you listen, it was nice to visit with you today, and good to see you on here. So anyway, so the story I want to talk about tonight are actually a couple of stories that all converge on each other. So the central character of this story is a man named Stephen Meek, and Stephen Meek and his brother Joe Meek were both born in Virginia, and they were both kind of destined to be trappers, explorers, and mountain men. They came from a farming family, and at that time, around the early 1800s or so, I want to say they were probably born around like 1815 or somewhere in there, maybe 1810. So Stephen Meek, born back in Virginia, and at that time, Virginia, a lot of people felt like that area was getting way too settled, and that's really kind of about the time that that a lot of the movement west was sort of happening. And to kind of put things in context, so that was before the San Francisco Gold Rush of 1849. That was before the major homestead migration west. So it was really in those years when the West still really was a wild frontier, where there really wasn't a lot of established communities or civilization, a little bit on the coast in places like Astoria and San Francisco, places like that. But for the most part, Rocky Mountain, the area west of the Rocky Mountains. Casey and fellow campers from Coach Faith. Thank you, Coach Faith. Really appreciate that. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of set the stage for the time. So the time is this period of time when really the West is largely uninhabited by white Europeans. For the most part, up until that time, it had really been just a small number of expeditions, basically exploring the Rocky Mountains and the area west of the Rocky Mountains. So the reason why I mention all that is because it kind of speaks to the spirit of Stephen Meek. So So they had this feeling that things were getting a little bit too crowded out there in the east in Virginia. So growing up, both Steve and his brother Joe, they had kind of a thirst for adventure, and they head out west. So Steve, he got a rifle, some basic provisions, and left Virginia. Hang on one second here. Left Virginia and headed number one, made the long journey all the way from Virginia all the way out into the Rocky Mountains and to the west. And one of his first jobs that he got was with the Rocky Mountain Fur Company as a fur trapper. So when he landed out there, he actually met another trapper along the trail, and that trapper told him that the Rocky Mountain Fur Company was hiring trappers. And so Steve Meek's first fur trapping job was with the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. So this would have been around 1830, somewhere in that ballpark. And and he went on for the next, 10, 15 years to work for a variety of different fur companies. He first went to work for the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. After that, he left, and he actually joined, was Benjamin Bonneville was the guy who explored the Bonneville Salt Flats. And Steve Meeks was actually an expedition that explored that whole Salt Lake City area down there. After that, he went on to be a trapper for the Hudson's Bay Fur Company. And through the course of all this, he got somewhat familiar with the West. And now, what I think is really interesting to think about, thank you, Craig, appreciate that, my friend, as always. What I think is really interesting to think about is when a guy like Steve Meeks at that time said he was getting familiar with the West. Now think about what that meant. The fastest mode of travel at that time was on horseback, was one man on a horse was the fastest way to cover country. And so in the matter of a couple of years, Steve Meeks had probably traversed the Rockies and the West a small handful of times. And if you think about that, think how many times we drive back and forth across just the state of Oregon or just the state where you live. And now imagine how familiar are you with that? So what I think about a lot is I think about guys like Steve Meeks when they took off on horseback and they headed up into the Rocky Mountains with nothing more than a really rudimentary hand-drawn map, probably, and a basic knowledge passed down from basically from word of mouth about what mountain ranges were what, and navigating by the stars and the sun to some degree like that. And then basically just understanding the drainages that from the crest of the Rocky Mountains, things tended to drain towards the Pacific Ocean, things like that. So really interesting to think about the fact that Steve Meeks was considered relatively knowledgeable about the West. So now fast forward a few years, and around 1841 is really when kind of the Western migration was really getting into full swing, right? Just starting in the 1840s. So at this point, there were starting to be fairly sizable wagon trains departing Missouri, heading across the Oregon Trail. So in 1842, I think it was, that Stephen Meek actually he guided his first wagon train. Now, that very first trip, what happened was he just basically guided the wagon train across the Oregon Trail. Now, for the most part at that point, the Oregon Trail was pretty well established, but there were several places along the route where there were choices to make depending on seasons, depending on how high rivers were and things like that. So it was still considered wise to have a guide at that point. In later years on the Oregon Trail, it became less necessary to actually have a wagon guide because the trail was more established and easier to follow. So it's thought that when Steve Meeks was guiding this 1842 wagon train across the Oregon Trail was really when the idea for the cutoff or a shortcut came up. And so what happened was as the Oregon Trail crossed kind of the Snake River country and it landed around Vail, Oregon, somewhere in the ballpark of where Highway 84, Interstate 84 now drops south. So keep in mind, this is at a point about halfway down, maybe a little more towards the southern part of the state of Oregon along the Oregon-Idaho border down in that area. So at that time, what had to happen was the wagons had the route dropped all the way down there to basically circumnavigate the Snake River Basin, because Hell's Canyon was pretty much an impenetrable barrier. Wagons couldn't cross that. So they came around the southern end of the drainage of the Snake River, and around Vail, Oregon, the trail turned back north. And really what it ended up doing was it went all the way back up north, connected with the Columbia River, followed the Columbia River all the way to about where Portland is in the Willamette Valley, and then dropped south to get people into the interior of the Willamette Valley. So it made a great big U going north and then dropped back south. Well, Stephen Meek's idea is, well, what if you could just cut straight across that? What if from that point around Vail, Oregon, you could just head due west and go straight over the Cascade Mountains and drop right into the Willamette Valley? And Stephen Meeks had actually trapped out in that region earlier in his career. He had actually trapped around what's called the Harney Basin. And if any of you know, that's the area around Burns, Oregon. And when Stephen Meeks had been in there trapping, if any of you guys have been through basically the Harney Lake Basin or the Harney Basin out in there, the water levels out there, like almost that whole basin can be a lake after a series of really wet years. But for the most part, it can also be a desolate place. Well, when Stephen Meeks was out there, and it has rivers going through that country, the Donner and Blitzen River and the Malheur River, things like that. But when Stephen Meek was trapping out there, it was lush and green, and there was a lot of water out there. So in his mind, he had this idea that he was going to be able to take this wagon train from Vail straight across the Harney Basin, all the way out, kind of roughly how Highway 20 goes now, kind of hook back north to the Deschutes River, cross the Deschutes River, go straight up over the Cascade Mountains and drop down into the Willamette Valley. So it was really a good plan based on a really rudimentary knowledge of the country, right? Well, so what happened was Stephen Meeks happened to be somewhere in the ballpark of Vail, Oregon, when this wagon train that had left Fort Laramie started into that area. So another really critical thing happened right here. There's kind of a convergence of several different kind of sets of circumstances that led to the crux of the point of this story that we're going to get to. So one of them is this wagon train leaves Fort Laramie without a wagon guide, but going along this fairly well-established stretch of the Oregon Trail. So the second kind of miraculous sort of set of circumstances that happened here is that Stephen Meeks happened to be in the area where this wagon train landed at the same time. So now the third set of circumstances comes into play here, which really kind of sealed the fate of Stephen Meek ending up guiding this wagon train. So what happened was, at the time, there were rumors of Indian Trail worked its way north, went up to the Columbia Gorge. It went through the Blue Mountains. And the Blue Mountains were, at that point, still what was considered Indian territory. And there were wagon trains had been attacked through there, or at least that's what the stories were. So these settlers, or would-be settlers coming out west, or in Vail, Oregon, they have no wagon boss, and they're really, really concerned about following the Oregon Trail through this area where all the Indian attacks are happening. All right, so now insert Steve Meeks into the scene. So Steve Meeks happens upon this wagon train, and he learns of this, and he knows about this shortcut. So he converges with the wagon train, and he says, hey, I can take you guys a shortcut that not only will shave miles off of your trip, but also it'll completely avoid the area where the hostile Indians are. So this sounded like a dream come true for the weary settlers that had already been all the way from Fort Laramie on these wagons. So they strike a deal, they agree on a sum of money, and they decide to set out in short haste. So with Steve Meeks guiding this wagon train. So at that point, what they do is they leave Vail, Oregon, and they start traveling west. So they start out kind of following the Malheur River. And if you guys were looking at a map of Oregon, you could kind of trace this route. So they start out kind of following the Malheur River. Then they work their way up, which goes up into kind of the southern part of the Blue Mountains. They cross up over a divide. They go way up a steep climb. They climb over 1,000 feet. In fact, as they go over this 1,000 feet climb over this divide that's going to drop them down into Cottonwood Creek, one of the settlers writes in his diary about how they have to move 1,000 rocks to create a path for the wagons to traverse. So the ground gets rockier and rockier, and it gets steeper. In fact, several oxen die on this ascent out of this canyon. They climb all the way up over this divide. And actually, to this day, you can still see where they moved rocks and stacked smaller rocks to create a path for the wagon. So they get all the way up over the top of that rise, and they drop down the other side into Cottonwood Creek. They wind around a little bit. They eventually come down, I think it was Cow Creek or Cow Canyon Creek, finally gets them to the point where they're going to dump out into the Harney Basin, the Harney Valley. So they come out of that rocky area and everything. And at this point, Steve Meeks is telling them, we're about ready to drop out into this fertile valley. Only it had been several years since Stephen Meeks had been to the Harney Basin. So at this point, when the wagons drop out there into the Harney Basin, they come down off of the divide, off of this high ridge, and they're looking out over this vast, like 100 miles almost, they can see out across the Harney Basin. And all they see is dry, desolate, alkali lake beds, no green anywhere. What water there is bad water. And so now they're really starting to get nervous, but they're committed. They have no choice. So they drop down into the Harney Basin, and they spend the next couple of weeks navigating across kind of the Harney Basin and working their way towards eventually what's now called Wagon Tire Mountain. So as they wind around out there, they really don't ever encounter any really reliable water. They find a couple of minor springs and seeps out there. They're basically able to keep just enough water to keep the majority of their stock alive. Now, let's go back a second, and I want to think about something, because it's estimated, and it depends on which account you read, but it's estimated that there were about 1,000 people on this wagon train in somewhere between 400 and 600 wagons. So if any of you were on the last Coyote Works group overland trip, you might remember we had 102 vehicles in our convoy. We had 102 vehicles on the trail, and that 102 vehicles on the trail stretched out over 2 miles long from the first vehicle to the last vehicle, with everyone having just a little space. So now I want you guys to picture 400 wagons in a wagon train. And what this meant was that the first wagon, the very first wagon, would arrive someplace, and it could be as much as 8 more hours before the last wagon in that wagon train got to the spot where the first wagon stopped. So this wagon train winds around across the Harney Valley, and they send out scouts every single day looking for water. And eventually they get to Wagon Tire Mountain. And on Wagon Tire Mountain, they find a spring on the slope of Wagon Tire Mountain. The problem is, again, it's not a very good spring. So the first group of wagons that get there are able to get water, and they get their stock. But now, over the course of hours, more and more of the wagons from this wagon train start rolling in. And as they get more and more wagons there, the grass is all eaten away by the stock, the water's turned to mud, and there's very little water left. So they end up most of them dry camping there. They share what little water they can and disperse it. And then from there, they send out scouts that go as far as 40 miles from there looking for water. And now here is where there's a couple of different accounts of the story. But basically what happens is they end up spotting some water at a place called the South Fork, the headwaters of the South Fork of the Crooked River. And they head to the headwaters of the South Fork of the Crooked River. And by a lot of accounts, this is where a couple of things happened. One thing, we're going to tie back to the search for lost gold. So I want you to remember, at this point, the wagon train arrives all intact on the South Fork of the Crooked River. So a couple of things happen at this point. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to continue on with the story of Meek's Cutoff and the lost wagon train. So all of the wagons get together here, and at this point, they've determined that Stephen Meeks is incompetent as a guide, and they don't trust him. So the decision is made. Actually, quite a few people want to hang Steve Meeks at this point. So the decision is made that the wagon train's going to split up, and the majority of the the majority of the people, I hear he's still here, man. Got cottonmouth just listening. I was thinking the same thing. The majority of the wagons decide from that point on the headwaters of the Crooked River that they're basically going to head due north and try to come back into Kramer Junction, my man. Good to see you. So the largest group of wagons is going to head due north in hopes that, and mind you, they're going to cross country that none of them have ever been in before, but they're basically just going to try to go due north. Because remember, we've got Point on the Oregon Trail, Point in the Willamette Valley over here, big horseshoe the Oregon Trail's making, and now the Meek wagon train is somewhere in the middle right here where they split up, right? So one group is thinking, well, if they go straight north, they're probably going to eventually hit the Oregon Trail. So that's the decision. The problem is they don't really have any knowledge of what lies in between there and what barriers the rivers and things like that are going to create. So Steve Meek tries to talk him out of it. He convinces a smaller group to follow him and to continue going west. So what happens is the group that goes with Meek travels west, and they eventually hit the Deschutes River, and they hit the Deschutes River at a point where it's pretty wide and in a pretty serious canyon. So what they decide to do is they decide to follow the Deschutes River north, which basically what happens is that as they follow the river north, it continues to get wider and in a deeper and deeper canyon. What they're thinking is that eventually the ground will get less severe, and they'll find a spot that they'll be able to cross the Deschutes River. So, but it doesn't happen. Now, mind you, when they get to the Deschutes River, they've crossed another 100 miles or so from the South Fork of the Crooked River of terrible scrub desert, high desert terrain, rocky, brutal country. So Meek's wagon train gets to the Deschutes River, and they start working their way north. The other wagon train, the larger party, went north, kind of up the Crooked River, followed the Crooked River drainage down, and eventually where the Crooked River empties into the Deschutes River or thereabouts is about where they hit the Deschutes River. So what happens is the two halves of the wagon train end up reuniting again on the Deschutes River. And now here's where things are really starting to get desperate, because now they have water, but there's still very little grass out there and things like that, and they can't get across the Deschutes River. So there's a place a little farther north, a place near a place near Shears Falls, or a place called Shears Falls, where there's a narrow spot in the river. At this point, there's one man whose wife and child, I believe, have died on this journey, and that man believes it's Steve Meek's fault. So that man determines that he's going to kill Steve Meeks that night. Well, Meek gets wind of this, and he decides he devises a plan that he's going to actually escape in the night, leave the wagon train, but he is going to go north and get help sent back with provisions and everything for the wagon train. So with just a couple of guys, he does that. He takes off, abandons the wagon train, heads north, but eventually he does get help, and he takes that help back to the wagon train and rescues them. So that's basically the story of Meek's Cutoff and the lost Meek wagon train. Was basically this attempt to go through this shortcut. Now, here's a couple other interesting little pieces of side trivia about this. So one is that Steve Meek actually purchased the first lot in the town site of Oregon City prior to leading that 1845 wagon train. So at this point in Steve Meek's life, he has a home base. He has a place. He's been involved with surveying and platting this town of Oregon City, and he owns a piece of land there. So it's interesting that he had that opportunity to settle down, but he still chose to continue seeking adventure out here on these wagons, guiding these wagons and continuing to trap for fur. So that's kind of an interesting side note there. So now, how does all of this tie back into the lost gold? Well, this is a really interesting question, but by a lot of accounts, there's a legend around here of the blue bucket gold, and by a lot of accounts, the legend of the blue bucket gold originates on the Meek wagon train. So, real quick, before I go into the legend of the blue bucket gold, I wanted to tell you an interesting thing. So Steve Meek's plan to have this shortcut, right? The Meek cutoff. Really, it worked had he known the way, except for the fact that the Deschutes River lied in the path of it. So what happened was when Meek's wagon train, when both parties got to the Deschutes River, they went north. And the problem with going north was, like I said, the canyon gets gnarlier, the country gets rockier, and the Deschutes River doesn't become any more crossable going north. So not too long later, another wagon train led by a man named Elliot, and I don't remember his first name, sorry, they decide to follow Meek's cutoff all the way to the Deschutes River, which they do. Now they know the route. Now they know where water holes are. That information's gotten passed on. But what they do is they turn south at the Deschutes River, and they go more closer to the headwaters of the Deschutes River and go straight over the Cascade Mountains, more like in the area where the Willamette Pass is today. And that became known as Elliot's Cutoff. At that point, the whole thing became known as Elliot's Cutoff, or the Free Immigrant Road. I don't know if any of you have heard that term in Oregon, the Free Immigrant Road. But basically, the Free Immigrant Road was not a toll road, whereas later, when the Willamette Valley Cascade Mountain Wagon Road was established in like 1860-ish, that was a toll road. So you either had the toll road up over the Santiam, where the Santiam Wagon Road, you know, that's pretty famous in Oregon, and the Willamette Valley Cascade Mountain Wagon Road also was the same road as the Santiam Wagon Road. That was a toll road, and so a lot of the settlers coming out west would opt to take the southern portion, which was the Free Immigrant Road. So a little piece of worthless trivia for you there, little side thing. So now let's get back to lost gold, because this is really interesting. So now, around about the time that the Meek wagon train had gotten in that vicinity of, maybe it was in the vicinity of Wagon Tire. Now, here's where there's a couple of different stories. So I'm just going to stick with the one that's on the South Fork of the Crooked River for now. We'll go with that version. So remember when the wagon train landed at that spring up on Wagon Tire, and they had barely enough water to get them to survive another day. And then they all got down to the South Fork of the Crooked River. Well, even in that area around there, there's very little water, so they're sending out these scouts. So one night out there, they made a dry camp, and a dry camp is just a term for a camp when there's no water inside of the camp. Now, supposedly, and there's a couple of different versions of this story, but supposedly what happened, wherever this happened in this general area, is that a couple of people, in some versions it's a couple of kids, in some versions it's a couple of boys, and one version, it's a boy and a girl, are sent to go seek out water. So in one version of the story, a couple of kids, they take off with a blue bucket. Now, you might ask, why is there a blue bucket on a wagon train? So at that time, the wagons, the way they were constructed is the wheel of the wagon went on, there was a hub. The hub of the wheel went on the axle. And on the outside of that was a washer. And then there was a pin called a lynch pin. And the lynch pin is basically the pin that just kept the wheel from sliding off of the axle, right? But the problem was that whole unit created friction as it was turning, as the wagons were rolling. So, and at that particular time, those model of wagon all had a bucket of tar that hung on the back corner of the wagon. And many people actually walked alongside the wagons those days, but irrespective, someone every once in a while would have to take a brush with a daub of tar out of that bucket that hung on the back of the wagon and splash it in that washer and axle joint to keep the axles from wearing out. So they would basically grease the wheel, right? And so there was a bucket, a grease bucket that hung on the back of these wagons, and all of these buckets all came from the same company, or the majority of them all came from the same company and they were painted blue. So the kids grab a blue bucket that at one point had been a tar bucket or a grease bucket to grease the wagon wheel, and they take off to find some water. So they find a wet spot in a creek and they start to dig. And as they're digging down there in the mud, they're filling up this. Oh, actually, I messed the story up already. They're using the bucket to dig in the mud and the gravels on the base of the creek. And eventually what happens is they get these kind of pretty little yellow rocks inside the bucket. Now, here's another thing that's really important to understand. So this is in 1845. Does anybody know when the first major gold rush out west happened? Dramatic pause. I know some of you do, but for the sake of time, I'm going to tell you. So the first major gold rush out west was in 1849, right? San Francisco 49ers. So 1848, 1849. So up until that point, most of the settlers, now you have to imagine that most of the settlers never went more than 25 miles from their home their entire life, right? So most people live their entire lives without ever traveling more than 25 miles from where they were born. That was the statistical probability in those days. Now, not only that, but there were no pictures. Most of them had never seen a picture. There obviously was no phones, no internet or anything like that. So none of these people on the Meek wagon train had any idea what a gold nugget looked like. The only way they would have known is if someone in their lives had ever shown them a gold nugget. Now, I want you guys to think about that, because if you want to know what something looks like today, we just Google it and we can see what it looks like. But back then, that wasn't the case. So the first thing that a lot of people say about this legend is they sort of poo-poo it and say, no, there's no way they would have known what that was when they found it. But that's the first thing that's really important to understand, is that's not necessarily the case. So these kids grab a few of these pretty rocks and they take them back to camp with them. And they ultimately do dig down far enough to get some water in the bucket, and they take it back to camp. Well, back at camp, here's where there's a couple of different stories. One story is that they put a couple of rocks in their pocket. A few people around camp think they're pretty. And then ultimately the wagon train goes on and they all end up in the Dalles, and they're eventually rescued. And then they disperse in the Willamette Valley. And then the gold rush happens, and eventually people start thinking about gold. And someone still has these gold nuggets in the wagon train and remembers that time when those kids found them. Now, actually, records indicate that quite a number of people remember this incident happening on the wagon train. The problem is first time through that country, no one knew this country, and it's really, really difficult for them to say exactly where that was, what night that was that happened. So basically what happens is somewhere along the course of this wagon trip between Vail, Oregon, actually probably between let's say between the Malheur River and the Deschutes River, somewhere in there this event occurred, where the variation of the story is that they were camped, and this one has a little more detail. It says they were camped in a valley with steep hills on both sides of them, which interestingly enough is a lot like the headwaters of the South Fork of the Crooked River. This account is a couple of kids go down and there was an actual stream. So they're collecting water out of the stream. Now, if this is more in the area of the Malheur River, up in the southern reaches of the Blue Mountains there were some later gold strikes in that area. That's very plausible. But in that version of the story, the kids actually found nuggets lying in the stream and brought them back. One version of the story has it that they thought they were copper, and one guy even put one of the nuggets on a piece of steel, and some people say a steel band on a wagon wheel, and smashes it with a hammer and is able to flatten it out. So they all assume that it's copper, because copper metal they're familiar with. So that's basically, in a nutshell, the story of the Meek Cutoff, Stephen Meek's wagon train, and the story of the lost Blue Bucket Gold. So people have been searching for the Blue Bucket Gold probably since the late 1800s. The searching for that gold started way back around when gold was first discovered in John Day, Canyon City area, which was shortly after the gold rush started to die off down in the San Francisco area. In fact, a section of the old wagon road that I was out looking for in the last couple of days called the Wairika Trail is called the Wairika Trail because it was the trail that the San Francisco 49ers, the gold prospectors from San Francisco, took to get to the Oregon gold rush up in John Day and Canyon City area. Interesting thing about that trail is that the majority of the traffic on that trail was one way. It was all coming north from California to Oregon. So that's the story. Now, why did I tell you guys this story? Well, for a couple of reasons. Is one, I think understanding that when a lot of you have traveled out towards the Alvord Desert, out through Burns, out the Malheur Wildlife Refuge, all that area. So one of it is just to give you a sense for the sheer amount of history. When you look out across that desert, think about the fact that when you look out across miles and miles of that flat scrub desert today, I want you to imagine that at least on one occasion, and actually we know on many occasions, groups of as much as 1,000 people were traveling across that country. And think about what 1,000 people brings with them. Think about 1,000 pennies in pockets. Think about 1,000 large cents. Think about 1,000 2-cent pieces. Think about 1,000 buttons, boot tacks, ox shoes. Think about the things that 1,000 people traveling in 400 wagons has with them. And that's the remnants of the history that are laying out there in the desert, right? So you have the Meek wagon train, then you have the Elliott wagon train, then you have countless wagon trains after them meandering through that desert. And many of them followed the same trail, but many of them took short little shortcuts and diverted, south around a small butte instead of north or something like that. You have But that's the thing I want to think about. So those wagon trains averaged maybe 8, 10, 12 miles a day out in country like that, right? And so that means every 8 to 10 to 12 miles, 1,000 people were camping, we're making camp, we're cooking, we're using utensils, we're doing all these things. Look out across that inhospitable desert today, and when people make comments about me spending time exploring some of the least beautiful or least attractive places of Oregon, but think about that history that's laying out there. And what's so cool about that desert is how well it preserves this stuff. So you can actually go out there, and I posted on my Instagram today announcement for this live video, and I posted pictures of a wagon train that was traveled in the 1860s, the Willamette Valley Cascade Mountain Wagon Road on there. And you can still see where that wagon road was. It's not like over in the valley, over in the west side of the Cascades, where all the trees overgrow it and blackberry bushes and everything. So this is what's laying around out there, just waiting for us to find it and interpret it and put back the pieces of this. So the second reason I bring this up, because I think occasional overland, myself, ADV Central Oregon, maybe Dirt Bandit Outdoors is going to jump in on it. Maybe Oregon Mike's going to jump in on it. But we're going to start actually trying to track down some of these legends and see if we can get close to the source and who knows, maybe even find a piece of the Blue Bucket Gold. But if nothing else, find some of those wagon camps along the way. So this is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, but it's something that's difficult to do solo. Some of the country that I've got to get back into to do this is rough country. It's country where you're going to need a couple of rigs. Dirt Bandit Outdoors is kind of the metal detecting expert. So it's bringing all these people together. Hopefully we've got occasional overland who's a technology guy. He's a tech guy, engineer type guy. So he'll bring that tech expertise to the table. We've got another guy that even knows about things like penetrating radar and stuff like that. So this will be an ongoing project, but it's basically what I'm thinking about and what I'm calling kind of the Coyote Works Legends series. And there's a couple more of these legends. One I actually will probably tell you guys about next week that I will be able to do some searching for solo is a little closer to home. has to do with a bag of gold and cash that was stolen from a stagecoach in the area that's never been recovered, and to the best of everyone's knowledge has never been found. But it's known for a fact that the robbers who took it were all killed, but somewhere along the way they ditched the gold. So I'm probably going to go into that story next week, and then I'll spend some time out there searching for that. All right. So that's kind of the main topic of the evening. Yeah, Craig, that's a good point. Then 1858 was the Colorado Gold Rush. And yep. So let's see. I'm just going to breeze through the comments here real quick, guys, see if there's any questions hanging out there. Does YouTube sometimes unsubscribe subscribers? I actually think it does occasionally. And the reason why I think that is because there's been a few channels that I've subbed for a long time that, like, I got a message from the guy and he's like, hey, how come you don't sub my channel anymore? And I was like, I do, but I think YouTube kicked me off. I just like Andy Singa says cans. And I don't know what you mean by cans, but if you mean what I'm thinking of, cans are one of my favorite things to find because they're, yeah. All right, so what else do we got here? No, still here is asking if I ever found that jar of coins on my friend's property. I did not, but we had a excavator in there, a backhoe, and I think we kind of chickened out on it. We were getting closer and closer to the existing home, and we kept taking another scoop of dirt and another scoop of dirt and another scoop of dirt. And I think we might just not have got quite far enough. I think where they put the newer home was maybe where the coins were underneath it. So nope. So somewhere underneath that house in that area, there's a jar of silver dollars dating all the way back probably to the early 1900s. In there. Yeah, I did some quick math on the size of the jar and the number of silver dollars in there. And I think I came up with the fact that probably like in just in melt value, there's a couple of $1,000s worth of silver in there. So that's a bummer. Let's see, a couple of comments. Oh, so T Caraway, a longtime subscriber, is asking, do I use or recommend Makita 18-volt tools for your home use? Well, I don't really use any tools at home, so I can't speak to that. But what I can tell you is that I use a Makita 18-volt handheld air compressor in my Jeep, and I use a Makita 18-volt dual battery-powered chainsaw. And I have a Makita lantern shop light that also runs off that same battery, and they're all bulletproof and have been great tools. So. All right, Kelton. He's only going to charge 10% of that gold. Rich Patton. Yeah, for sure, my friend. For sure, man. Yeah. So another thing, real quick while we're here, to let you guys know, I am still working on dates. So I am planning on having a series of kind of group overland trips this year. There'll be I'm going to bite them off in smaller chunks. And then, so I'll have a couple of smaller ones. We'll do those on a series of private ranches around. And we'll all have to chip in, pay some money for those ones. And then I'm thinking the open invite one will be like sometime June, early July or something like that. Or maybe we'll do the fall again. I don't know. But I'm thinking that one we'll do down around the Alvord Desert. I've gotten a lot of requests for that. And there's some cool country down there I can take you guys into. All right. So let's see what else is on the list. Boom. All right. Real quick. Yeah, business items, I think I already covered. You know it, man. Really appreciate it. I always want to take a couple of minutes to say thank you to those of you who do the super chat contributions and the direct contributions to my PayPal, and then the merchandise sales through Lolo Overland. You can just go to the Lolo Overland Outfitters website to buy Coyote Works merchandise. Use the code Coyote, and you'll get 5% off everything in your shopping cart, no matter what you order there too. So if you need overland gear and everything, Mark Taniguchi, it looks like you bought it for more than $1, my friend, but I'll take it, man. Appreciate it. All right, so let's do a little show and tell. Let's see what Oregon Mike threw in the box for us, right? I'm always I'm always wondering about his care packages. It's been a while since I've got one. So Mount Hood Growler, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed that story. Let me get some room cleared off here. I'm probably going to have to stand up for this too. So Dirt Bandit Outdoors. Thank you, my friend. Okay. See if I can do this without breaking anything. Can you guys still hear me okay? I'm a little ways away from the mic. Of course, now I can't see the comments. All right. Okay, so here is the box that Oregon Mike sent me. So notice the decor on it. First of all, it's always creative. Usually definitely not politically correct, ever. You can always count on that from good old Oregon Mike down there. And then, as he knows, one of my favorites, a lot of Hello Kitty stickers. So, like I said earlier, I did slit the tape on this, but Oregon Mike can attest as things come out of the box that I have not been inside it. This is packed exactly like Oregon Mike packed it. So I just used I got to show you guys this, my Coyote Works Signature Series Benchmade AFO to open the box up. All right, get rid of that paper. Okay, the first thing, some good instructions. Loot under here. A lot of packing material. Oh man, there's notes all over this stuff. All right. Oh, this is a very strong magnet. Useful for holding printing tool under desk, table, chair, etc. So that's very handy to have. Let's see. We have a surprising how many places these will get you into. All right, so what do we think this is then? See what we got here. What's wrapped up? Oh, perfect. Okay. A hard hat and a flagger's vest. I'm not going to presume to read too much into what Mike's thinking, but oh yeah, good point. So surprising how many places that a hard hat and a flagger's vest can get you into, but hard to pull off when you're wearing flip-flops and a t-shirt, which is my summer attire when I'm not out in the desert. All right, what else do we got here? Way better than my yo-yos, plus custom camo. Let's see what this is. The other thing you guys don't know Oregon Mike is that he's a bushcraft guy from way back. He and I have done a lot of outdoor trips. Okay, perfect. So these are traps, mouse traps. And the idea is for these to go into long-term sustainment survival kits. So these are good getters for small game. You can even catch rabbits and birds and things like that. One thing a lot of people don't think about using this style of trap for is catching birds. So they're really good. You put a little bit of seed, or if you have some like the peanut butter out of the MRE pages, works awesome. You put a little bit of peanut butter right on there. You set this trap, and then the birds, when they come to peck it, the trap will actually spring and close on their head. So number one, it kills them instantly and humanely. Number two, it doesn't destroy any meat. And number three, they're extremely effective. So these are perfect, Mike. Always a good thing to have around and always a good thing to keep in your long-term survival kit. So when the zombie apocalypse comes, that'll be a pretty good piece of gear. Okay, so this is actually a piece of gear that I've just been wanting to try out for a while that Mike sent me. This is a hammock. This particular one looks like it's the Hennessy Hammock Deluxe Explorer. So I'm just going to give this a try. I have another hammock that I've used a few times. Never really been a fan of hammock camping, but it might be because the hammock I have is not the greatest one in the world. So Oregon Mike sent me this one, so you guys will see me do a pack trip, a little more of a survival trip where I sleep in the hammock one of these days. Okay. Books. One from Mike, one from Julie. So let's see what we got here. I like them. These are really handy too. These kind of space blanket material foil packages. For those of you that don't know this, one thing these make awesome is cushions to sit on. So you can throw them in a pack. I don't know how the heck you get this open though. So you can throw a piece of this inside your pack. It's super light, super compact. And then you can pull it out and use it to sit on. It'll keep you warm if you're on wet or frozen ground or sitting on snow. Just a handy little piece of gear to have. So we're going to actually use our cutting tool here. Hate to do that, but sorry, Mike, I couldn't figure out how to get it open efficiently without cutting it. Hopefully that wasn't blasphemy. Oh, maybe there's directions on here. It says other side homie on it. Dang, I don't even know how you got this in here. All right, well, it just so happens that I have a couple of knives around here. So let's see if this Busey Basic 5 survival knife can open this thing. Oh, speak of the devil. Look at this, guys. All right, so this is, I haven't actually heard of this one. So John Ringo, The Last Centurion. I believe this is the one from Julie. Casey, I hope you enjoy the book. I felt the middle part, book 2, was a bit slow, but that may just be me. I hope you aren't easily offended by language. No, I'm not easily offended by language. I'm reading the Without Warning series by John Birmingham now. If you're interested in that and haven't read it, which I would be, just let me know and I can drop them in the mail. You can text, email Michael or me, whichever. Phone number and everything. Awesome. Awesome, Julie. Thank you. I will definitely enjoy reading that. Okay. So check this out, guys. And I know you're going to say that we planned this, but I really had no idea I was going to talk about the meat cutoff tonight until this weekend. Look at the book that I just got from Oregon Mike. The meat cutoff. How ironic. And that's pretty cool, man. I actually don't have that book. So that'll be cool to read even another account of the history there. All right. What else we got here? We got a storytime snack. The Beanie Weenies. And then it looks like there's some cat chew marks on here. A little bit of history. I actually love Beanie Weenies. When I was a kid, for whatever reason, we ate Beanie Weenies a lot out hunting. In fact, I remember these little cans of Beanie Weenies. One thing that was really common is in my hunting pack, I would have a can of these Beanie Weenies, and I would always have a candle as part of my day pack survival kit. And so a lot of times you're out hunting and it's cold. Around here, hunting seasons were usually October, November, sometimes even snow. So I'd take a couple of rocks, put them in a pile on the ground, wedge my candle down underneath them, light the candle, and set my can of Beanie Weenie on top of the candle flame, have the candle heating it up, and I would have nice hot Beanie Weenies. So I remember doing that when I was really young, pretty consistently, and I've just always loved Beanie Weenies ever since then. So thank you, Oregon Mike, for one of my favorite trail snacks. Okay, so this one says, what do you think, guys? This one says legal, but probably better not open on YouTube. So what do you think? Legal, but better not open on YouTube. Used to guard your cooler full of tasty beverages. Well, I do like tasty beverages. They are pretty important. All right, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? What do you got? What do we got here? Uh-oh. Let's see what it says on the inside. Insert 209 primer and add tripwire. Hole drilled for mounting. I think this is another zombie apocalypse survival kit item. Let's see what we got here. Ah, all right. All right, I know what this is. Not going to talk a lot more about this, but any fellow bug out junkie and survivalist can probably imagine. They're just really good early warning devices. So they're basically a pin assembly, put a 209 primer in them, and you run tripwires from them. So they're a really good way to create some noise or an early warning system for your camp setup. Pretty cool, Mike. That's awesome, man. All right. This is just a quick prototype made out of scraps and my first time working with rawhide. Candle inside. Okay, so let's check this out. Oh, very cool. Very cool. Okay, so check this out. So this is a lantern. And I don't know if you guys can see this, but there's a place down in the bottom for one of these tea lights to go. And what will happen is the rawhide will diffuse the light. So it's a pretty cool kind of old school wooden lantern, man. Something like a homesteader would have put together. That's pretty badass, man. Nice work, Mike. That's awesome. Like the brass rivets in it and okay. All right, so got another package. I'm going to set this aside. It says, this one says I better not open this unless the super chats say so. I have no idea what it is. All right, so I'm going to set this down. If you guys, well, you got to listen to Mike. So I guess if you want to see that open, okay. So let me know what you guys think if you want to see that. Okay, I have no idea what this is. It says, was this the one that burned up in the Jeep? It has high and low party modes. So I have no idea what this is. Oh, no, it wasn't the one that burned up in the Jeep, but it's a magnet light, so these are super handy. Right? I don't have anything I can stick it to in here, but no, that's awesome. These are really handy lights. Okay. Just packing. Okay, so that means there's nothing in that and nothing in that. All right. Okay, let's see. See what we got here. Let's get this back. Uh-oh, I see a super chat. Is that because people want me to open this? Open the shake. Oh, maybe that's what it is, a shake weight, huh? You guys just want to watch me do that? That was really wrong. All right. Open it, open it, open it. All right. All right, Mike. Well, hopefully this is not going to get me into trouble. It looks like a couple of people want to open. Right? Let's see. Hey, I'm intrigued by this. Carol says open. Oh, you guys. This is so funny, man. Mike and I think so much alike. Was I not just talking about like the zombie apocalypse and everything and being prepared for it? By the way, when I don't have my Coyote Works survival knife, these Busey Basics are pretty good knives. My only problem with it is it's just a little small for my handle, or the handle is just a little small for my hand. But other than that, these Busey knives are some of the best knives in the world. But I think what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to put this in the raffle at the next group Coyote Works trip. Yeah, I don't know. I think the last time I've seen on eBay, these things are going for like almost $500. But you guys want to see this, don't you? Okay. Nice leather sheath here. Maker sheath, fire steel, can carry it crossbody. Yeah. Okay, you guys ready for this? This is pretty cool, man. Check it out. The Ultimate Zombie Club. Or maybe there's something, look at this handle. It's got the typical, all right, so now I'm set for the apocalypse. I've got my homestead lantern and my zombie club. That's pretty awesome, Mike. Check it out too. It's all decorated up, and this thing's got some weight to it, man. I don't know what this is up here, but this thing has got some heft. Mike, I think you ought to go into business making post-apocalyptic bludgeoning tools or melee weapons, man. I think you got a knack for this. That's pretty awesome. Should make a whole line of them and sell them at Lolo, sell them through my brothers up at Lolo Overland. I'm sure Daniel would be up for that, huh? All right, well, that was pretty cool. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the mail call from Oregon Mike. That was pretty cool. Oh, Dana, this is some money for some ground round from the grocery store, so I lay off shooting the bunnies on the range. Oh, save the bunnies. Well, I'll tell you guys, I can't actually even remember the last time that I hunted anything. For the most part, I'm not saying I'm opposed to it or anything like that. It's just not something that I hardly ever do anymore. So Dana, your bunnies are pretty safe unless it is a zombie apocalypse and I've got to feed myself, and then all bets are off. I'm sorry to tell you. Yeah, I'll leave that to Jamie GF Burke on here. He's the bunny slayer, man. But we always eat them, so he brings strap to the trips. All right, what else, guys? Gotta look at my notes here. Let's see. Did I tell you guys what time is it? Oh man, all right. I've got a long story for you guys, but I'm gonna have to save it till next week. Okay, so a couple other things real quick. So one is I had a question from at Dave VG on Instagram. Actually sent me a direct message on Instagram and asked for book and podcast ideas. So I thought I'd throw out there a couple of books. One, I really enjoy like kind of post-apocalyptic fiction and even some of the older stuff. Obviously, you know, anything related to like Bug Out series, things like that. So there's a book called Collective Retribution that I really enjoyed. And actually that guy that wrote that, I'm going to Google it real quick. Retribution. Okay, so D.S. Edwards wrote two books. One of them is called Collective Retribution, and the other, I forget what the other one was called. But anyway, those are two books that are kind of centered around a sort of a societal collapse that are really good. So D.S. Edwards, Collective Retribution, really good one. Another one that I'm reading right now is actually the Savage Sun series by Jack Carr. Jack Carr is a Navy SEAL, was a Navy SEAL, and is writing a couple of books. I think he has 3 books out now. Oh man, Ed, thank you, my friend. Yeah, you're more than welcome, man. More than welcome. It's my pleasure to keep all the posts and the videos coming, man. I just appreciate the support from everybody. you included, it really goes a long ways towards helping me keep all that stuff going. And, you know, one thing that I have to tell you guys that is super cool about the contributions is that it's just one of the, I guess, just really surprises me how much some people appreciate the content that I put out. Like, I still feel like, to a degree, like I'm sort of that history nerd guy that just kind of, you know, that I've never really grown out of being a boy that likes to play in the woods and be a redneck. And it's really kind of surprising that people enjoy it enough, and especially surprising that people are enjoying enough to contribute financially to the process of me producing more of it. So, you know, that's one of the things too. So anyway, the Jack Carr Sun series, really good books that I've really enjoyed. I'm just about through, I'm about 2/3 of the way through Savage Sun right now. Earth Abides is an older book. In fact, I just got an updated copy of that from my buddy Ted with Black Pearl Voyager, who I don't see on here tonight. He's usually on these, but he actually gave me a copy of that, so I'm reading it recently. But that's called Earth Abides. Great book, Dave. Another book I really enjoyed is called The Road. It's really kind of a melancholy journey of a boy, his father, and I think dog. But it's just a really interesting perspective of kind of a post-wasteland kind of a world. Podcasts. He also asked about Brian Peterson. Thank you, man. Thank you. No worries, man. No worries. I just appreciate the contribution and glad you're here. So a couple of podcasts that I've been really enjoying. One is a guy called Dave Hagedorn, and he has a couple of them, but the one that I'm really enjoying is called 1001 Heroes, Legends, and Histories. So just remember that 1000, like 1001, Heroes, Legends, and History. And he basically tells stories. Like the podcast I'm listening to right now is he's narrating the story of Tom Horn, who is this bounty hunter. And so historic accounts of actual characters from the West and from history, really cool stuff. And he does a good job narrating. So that's Dave, Hagedorn. Of course, there's I really like the Cleared Hot podcast. That's a guy named Andy Stump. He's kind of a former military guy or whatever, but he gets a pretty wide variety of guests on there. Everything from like hunters and outdoorsmen and survival experts, obviously, you know, other military guys and stuff like that, but also political figures, just interesting people, and sort of from all spectrums on there. So I really enjoy that. The Fieldcraft Survival podcast is another one of my favorites, another one of my standbys. I really like, not necessarily just Mike Glover's stuff, but he's got a couple of other guys that do the Fieldcraft Survival podcasts that do a really good job. And then they get some pretty diverse and interesting guests on there too. So I would say 1001 Heroes, Legends, and Histories, Cleared Hot, Fieldcraft Survival. Of course, like millions and millions of other people. I like some of Joe Rogan's podcasts, not all of his stuff, but definitely as he's gotten older, I feel like more of his podcasts are more interesting, more of the guests. And maybe part of it is that he's gotten bigger and he's able to command, you know, bigger guests. So, I mean, he gets some really interesting people on there. Whether you agree with them or not, they're interesting, like Elon Musk and people like that. So I really enjoyed that. So there's some books. I'd start with the Jack Carr, Earth Abides, The Road. Glenn Tate is another one, another author, writes kind of a survival type fiction, really good stuff. So that's kind of that. Let's see, what do we got? Any other questions? Still here, thank you, my friend. Oh man, so I don't know if you guys can see Still Here's comment, but that, man, I just can't even tell you how incredible it is to hear stuff like that, man. That if if watching my videos could help make life just even a tiny little bit better for you through an experience like that, I feel like my work is done. That is so cool. I can't tell you how much I love hearing about that when somebody, you know, when my content has a small part in inspiring somebody to get outside and enjoy pursuing that kind of stuff for themselves. And he says he actually gave me a Jeep wave outside of Primeville once. So hopefully I waved back, my friend. If I didn't, I apologize. I'm really trying to bring the Jeep wave back, my friend. I try to wave at everyone at Jeep. I feel like about 50% of them just think I'm some kind of a weird stalker or something like that. But all right, Homer White wants some Shaniko stories, so I'll put those on the list. Couple of things coming up. Obviously, the Legend series right now is just really kind of a frustrating time of year for me. It's really for me to plan out trips and get into places I want to go, just between snow melting off and mud, and the conditions make it really difficult for me to know where I'm going to be able to get to. And I know a lot of people don't understand that. Like, typically you can just sort of watch the weather, right, and decide. But in this country, in Central Oregon, like, there's so many differences in elevation, and the weather patterns and everything can be different, just like one drainage or mountain range over. So like a lot of times, like what happened this weekend is, you know, I left my town where I'm at, like, you know, 3,200 feet in elevation or something like that. I head up in the upper country. I'm up around 5,000 feet. Well, the temperature warmed up to like 60 degrees during the day. So everything started thawing fast. I mean, there was water running down little drainages and ravines and stuff, massive snow melting off, and it just kind of made a disaster out of things. So, so that's kind of the way that it goes around here. And then like it could get down to 20. In fact, I think it did that night, got down to about 25 degrees, and I woke up with a skiff of snow on the ground in the morning, and you guys will see that in the video. So this time of year is really tough for me to say, but things that are on the list is, you know, I'm really excited about kind of this Legends series or this history series. I want to try to do a little better job of tying my trips and some of the things that I'm exploring into actually the stories and telling the stories behind them too, because I think that'll help maybe some of you get a better sense for how like cool and how special to me it is to find some of this evidence on the ground out there. Is maybe if I can weave in a little bit more of the stories, because I know what it means. I know the context of what it fits into when I find it on the ground, but I don't know that I've always done a great job of telling that story so you guys can understand that too. So I'm excited about that. That's kind of given me a new passion. Definitely want to start weeding in a little bit more. I kind of took a break from doing much content on the survival and things like that in these last couple of years. But, you know, it's something that's always a part of my life. I'm always practicing survival skills, and I want to talk to you guys about more of that stuff on the course of these podcasts or these live streams. And it's something that I think it's important for you guys to see me doing it. So in essence, I'm putting my money where my mouth is, so to speak, right? Like I've always felt like it's important that if I'm going to talk about something like survival, like I need to be able to demonstrate that it's not just theory. Like what I know, the information that I know that I transmit to you guys, and this is one thing that I want you to know you can count on with a channel like with my channel, is that the information that I deliver to you guys is based on my own personal experience. The things that I tell you about overlanding and camping and all of that stuff are based on my years and years and years of experience out there. It's based on a lot of really hard lessons that I've learned. It's based on making a lot of mistakes over that time. But that's something I want you guys always to be able to trust, is that whatever information I'm delivering, it comes from my own experience. I'm not just regurgitating something that I heard on some other YouTube channel or something like that. Like I didn't get into YouTube and then start going outdoors and camping to make a cool YouTube channel, right? Like I've been doing this stuff my entire life. And 7 years ago, I started making videos of the experience out there. So hopefully you guys can appreciate that, and that can be meaningful. And you know that I always do my best to answer questions and things like that. All right, what else, man? Let's see. I know. West Vic Off Road just commented on their YouTube needs to stop censoring that type of content. It's important, and I agree 100%. I've really been struggling. Something that I wanted to kind of do a heart-to-heart talk with you guys on here about on one of my live streams is really like the whole concept of like guns and firearms and how they fit into a rural culture. And like, you know, I get that comment so often on my videos where somebody will see a firearm in one of my videos and they'll comment something along the lines of, you know, well, why do you feel like you need a gun out there or something like that? And what I'd really like to do is talk to you guys about how they're sort of a part of the culture, and they're a tool, and they're a normal part of life, and they're a piece of equipment that's used for enjoyment, that's used as a tool, that's used for all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, you know, where I come from, where I grew up culturally, like we don't see firearms as evil or anything like that. You know, they're just another object. They're like a four-wheeler or something like that. So I don't know, maybe give me some feedback whether or not I think I can share some perspectives on firearms from the rural America environment and from, you know, a history of outdoorsmen and things like that that might be interesting to some of you and might help other people understand why it is that they're constantly a part of my life. But that's just an example of something that I feel really bad that YouTube tends to censor. And I don't care, right? Like at the end of the day, if you guys will support me like you do with your super chats and stuff like that, then I can talk about content like that I'm not dependent on YouTube. And it's not the end of the world if they shut down the algorithms of search on my video and they turn off the monetization or whatever because you guys support it. So let me know if that's something you'd be interested in me taking a deep dive into on one of these. Yeah. Yeah, true, man. Good comments on that. Yeah, good, clean, fun, Plinkin. Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's interesting. Let's see, who is it? So Steve Buckskinner 54 just commented, I find asking someone why they need a gun out in the wilderness to be somewhat odd. And that it's interesting you say that because that's how I always feel when I get that comment. Like, it's hard to explain, but when somebody leaves a comment that says, why do you feel like you need a gun out in the woods? The comment itself seems to be coming based on an assumption that I feel like I need a gun out there. And maybe I do and maybe I don't, but that's sort of beside the point. Like, I have a gun out there. Does it matter whether I need one or not? Like, I like them. I enjoy them. I enjoy shooting them. Like, why? I don't know. It just always strikes me as odd as that question, why do you feel like you need one out there, is prefaced in the concept that the only reason I should have one is because I need it. And that's not the case. That's not the only reason why I should have one. I don't think anyone needs a Lamborghini or needs a, you know, I don't think anyone needs a car that goes 200 miles an hour. I don't think anyone needs a yacht. I don't think anyone needs, you know, a pontoon boat or very few people need one to go out. It's never been in America a requirement for having something. It's never been, need has never been a requirement for owning something in this country. And I don't understand why we're getting to the point where people are starting to feel that way. So anyway, I don't want to get on my high horse there, but yeah, let me know if that stuff is interesting. You know, I have a lot of friends in law enforcement. You guys will see every once in a while our local chief of police will pop on here. Really super good dude, man. I think he's one of the best chiefs our community's ever had. He and I have shot together. We've metal detected together. He's just a solid dude. And I don't know. It's interesting. Wait, let's see. Travis Hudson says, Dana nailed it. Now I'm curious, what did she nail? Going back and looking for her comment. All right, guys. I think, let me just list real quick. I think that's about everything I had for tonight. And as usual, I'm getting lean on dinner and ready for a snack. So I think I'm going to head out, but hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I know I didn't talk a lot about camping and overlanding, but hopefully you enjoyed that little glimpse into the history, and then we can tie that back into some of the trips and some of the searching that we're going to do later. So as always, I just want you guys to know how much I really appreciate you guys joining in these. I've really felt like these Sunday evening chats have been like my way to actually get to hang out with some of you that are kind of my, my core, my closest friends, my closest followers, and you get to, talk a little bit more deeply about stuff that I really care about and that you guys care about too. So keep the suggestions and the comments coming. Lummox Overland Adventures, man, you get the prize for the best comment of the night. The Sheep Shooters Association, man, that's another part of the history around here. Yeah. So anyway, I just really enjoy these, and I hope you guys too. Please do keep the questions, the suggestions coming. You guys can DM me on Instagram after this video posts on my channel. If you have ideas for future ones, put them down in the comments below. Every Sunday before I go live, I kind of look through the comments and see if there's any questions. So I think that's about all for this one, guys. So T. Caraway, for sure, my friend, for sure. George, have a good one, my friend. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Steve Hop, Uncle Joe Hikes, JL2 Off-Road, man. I haven't been over to your channel since last week, but I've still got the link down below here. And man, that is some beautiful country out there. If you guys haven't seen it, check out the JL2 Off-Road YouTube channel. Link is down in the description below. He's out in New Zealand, and man, that is some incredible country out there. Scott Mart, man, I don't even think I saw you tonight. I'm sorry, my friend. Odie Slim, always a pleasure. Greg Alla. John Zach. Let's see. Oh, Red Mexican Hendrix, man. I didn't even see you either tonight. All you guys sneaking around in here. Mojave Mike. I know Oregon Mike's on here. I think Oregon Camping Mike. Oregon Mike, thanks for the care package. Camping Mike and K9 Buddy or Lone Wolf Overland on here. They're out there exploring around the country, and I think Camping Mike's new friend Faith, who also was on here, I think she's going to have a YouTube channel coming soon, so that'll be pretty cool. I would show you guys a picture of her, but I don't want to embarrass her or Camping Mike. So awesome, man. Nate, thank you, my friend. Nate saying congrats on the 70K. Just crossed over, so it may not hold there. My subscriber growth is pretty slow. Jamie, Sarah, I didn't get to give you guys a hard time tonight. I was going to show you my shoes. I know Jamie much prefers, is much more interested in the kind of pants I wear, but I do have some pretty cool shoes on too. Dirt Bandit Outdoors, still here. Burning G21 for sure. We're going to do it this year, my man. Sarah, love always. Mike Patterson, occasional overland. Good to see you, my friend. By the way, Mike, I did play around with, I have been playing around with the OBS software. I spent about an hour or two with it today. I think I'm getting close to being able to try that. So we'll need to do a trial run on a stream with that. So Jackie, good night out in Michigan. Nate Zoinks, Brian Peterson, Josh Rue, what's up, my friend? I hope you guys all enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. For this one, that's all. Coyote Works out. I'll catch you on the next adventure.